Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to MTGO Traders. My name is Taryn, and this is Abzan, Revel, and Riches for Rivals of Ixalan Standard. So Revel and Riches is an enchantment where if we have 10 treasures on the battlefield, we win the game at the beginning of our upkeep. It's a fantastic combo way to win. It's a really fun way to win, but it isn't really a competitive way to win. And this deck right here aims to change that. But of course, before I get into it, make sure to like the video. If you like the video, helps this channel out a lot and helps keep content flowing. So getting right into it, let's start with the creatures here. We have a 4 of Direfleet Hoarder, a 2-mana 2/1, probably the premier card for us for the treasure deck here. Human Pirate. When Direfleet Hoarder dies, create a colorless treasure artifact token with tap, sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Direfleet Hoarder is going to be a great way for us to trade in the early game, as well as get some treasures to build up in the mid to late game. Next up here for us, we have a Gleaming Barrier. This is a new card from Rivals of Ixalan, a 2-mana 0/4 wall defender. Whenever it dies, create a colorless treasure artifact token again with tap, sacrifice. So it's the same ability that Direfleet Hoarder has, except it is a 0/4 wall. So a lot better at being able to block early game advantage and early game aggro in game 1. Again, when both of these creatures dies, they do create treasure tokens, which do go to our actual goal to getting the Revel and Riches. And then next up, our last 4 creatures are Anointer Priest here. It's a 2-mana 1/3/4 of Human Cleric. Whenever a creature token enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life, and it also has Embalm for 4 mana. So this deck is secretly a hidden stockpile deck wrapped around a Revel and Riches shell, sort of. Or I guess I should say that the other way around. This is secretly a hidden stockpiles deck with a, Revel and Riches kind of sub-theme within it. Basically, with our Gleaming Barrier and our Direfleet Hoarder, we're going to be triggering Revolt, and with Anointer Priest, we're going to be gaining some life with some tokens coming into the battlefield thanks to Hidden Stockpile. Next up here for us for Planeswalkers in the deck, because this is Abzan, we have Vraska Relic Seeker, because this can produce treasures for us. This is a 6-mana 6 loyalty legendary Planeswalker Vraska, +2 create a 2/2 black pirate creature token with Menace. That's alright, but -3 years, destroy target artifact, creature, or enchantment, create a colorless treasure artifact token with, of course, tap, sack. The -3 here is going to be the important one for us, as it does give us board presence, 4 treasures, and also destroying a creature, which does give us 2 treasures thanks to Revel and Riches' ability of whenever an opponent creature dies. And of course, the -10 is target player's life total becomes 1. More often than not, we're not going to use the -10. We want to try and win with Revel and Riches. If we can't, though, -10 could be used as well. Moving on from Planeswalkers, though, we have 3 of Fatal Push. Always a good card to put in a black deck here. It's a black mana instant. Destroy target creature if it has converted mana cost 2 or less, and Revolt, destroy that creature if it has converted mana cost 4 or less. Instead, if a permanent you controlled left the battlefield this turn. So because we have lots of treasures going on in the actual deck here, Fatal Push is going to be basically a straight up removal spell for anything from converted mana cost 4 or less. Because keep in mind, whenever you use a treasure artifact, you're actually sacking it to use it into your mana pool. So that does create a Revolt trigger right there, and then Fatal Push can be used for a 4-mana creature or less. Except for some more removal for us, we have 4 of Fumigate, a 5-mana sorcery, destroy all creatures. You gain 1 life for each creature destroyed this way. The hardest creatures, of course, to destroy would be Hazaret, Ronas, and Adanto Vanguard in the vampire list there. But more often than not, though, Fumigate's going to gain us some life, gain us some couple turns as far as making sure that we can actually last a little bit longer in the match. And if we're up against an aggro deck, our opponent will probably be, more often than not, in the top deck mode by the time Fumigate does hit the board. That's it for regular spells. Let's move on to artifacts here. We have 4 of Treasure Map. This is a 2-mana artifact 4 of. We can pay 1 and tap it, scry 1, which we want to do at our upkeep, put a landmark counter on Treasure Map, then if it has 3 or more, remove those counters, transform Treasure Map, and create 3 colorless treasure artifact tokens. And if, of course, when it flips, it turns into Treasure Cove, we can add 1 colorless, and we can sack a treasure and draw a card. So if we're in the mid to late game, we're not truly there yet with the Revel and Riches, we can just use the treasures to draw some cards, which is fantastic for us. Moving on to enchantments, though, because this is the only artifact for us, we have 3 Legion's Landing. This is an interesting card for us. This is a 1-mana 3 of legendary enchantment. When Legion's Landing enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. Very good for us to be able to block and gain some life. Whenever you attack with 3 or more creatures, transform Legion's Landing. That transforms into Adanto the First Fort. We can add 1 white to our mana pool and pay 3, create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. Legion's Landing, more often than not, will just be our turn 1 play. And of course, when it does flip into Adanto the First Fort, it can turn into a situation where we can actually create tokens every single turn. If we have cards like Anointed Procession, which we have in the deck as well, we can create 2 tokens every turn as well. Keep in mind, first and foremost, the deck is about going wide and hopefully swinging out for the win, or going into our treasure tokens and winning that way. So there's 2 different ways we can actually win the game here. Next up for us, we have 4 Hidden Stockpile, going to be a mainstay in this deck. It's a white-black 4-of enchantment with Revolt. At the beginning of your end step, if a permanent you control left the battlefield this turn, create a 1/1 colorless server artifact creature token, and we can actually pay 1, sacrifice a creature, and scry 1. So we can get a Revolt trigger off on our own if we need to in the early game, but more often than not, we're going to have treasures to sack for a Fatal Push or any kind of other activation and get Revolt off that way. Once we get Hidden Stockpile going, it's going to be very hard for our opponent to kind of slow that down unless they have lots of removal. Next up here, we have 2 Anointed Procession. I thought of putting a 3F here, but I do think 2 is kind of like the sweet spot here. It's a 4-mana enchantment. If an effect would create 1 or more tokens under your control, it creates twice that many tokens instead. So fantastic for us. If it creates a treasure token, it's going to create 2 treasure tokens. If we get a 2/2 Pirate with Menace from Vraska, we're going to get 2 2/2 Pirates with Menace. Very, very good for us. And of course, it works very well with a flipped Allegiance Landing too. But of course, Anointed Procession is one of those cards where you want to play it not really on turn 4, but more like on turn 6 or 7, because it's a card that really does nothing once it hits a battlefield. You want to have a follow-up play with Anointed Procession. Next up, for some extra removal, we have 3 Cast Out, a 4-mana enchantment with Flash. When Cast Out enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent and opponent controls until Cast Out leaves the battlefield, and cycling for 1 white mana. Cast Out's here to grab Scarab God, it's here to grab Ronos, it's here to grab Hazoret, anything with Indestructible that we really don't like. Nihini, also things like that. I think Cast Out is fantastic here for us, and it's also very good at being able to kind of grab a Bristling Hydra if they only have enough energy entering the battlefield to gain it hexproof. If they don't, we're going to grab it with Cast Out. And of course, if we get Cast Out in the early game, we might just cycle it away because we do have Fumigate in the main board as well for some extra removal. And the last 2 cards in the actual deck here are, of course, Revel in Riches, a 5-mana enchantment 2-of. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, create a colorless treasure token, and that's great for us. And of course, at the beginning of our upkeep, if you control 10 or more treasures, you win the game. So we have lots of ways to create treasures. We have Anointed Procession to double the amount of treasures we make. By itself, Treasure Map can actually create 6 treasures for us, and that's amazing. Fumigate can create a lot of treasures for us too, thanks to Revel in Riches. Overall, it's a great way to get a lot of treasures, so on the upkeep, we can win the game. But of course, we want to keep in mind that Revel in Riches is a very easily disrupted way to win a game, and that is why the rest of the deck is kind of a hidden stockpile shell, because if we do get a Revel in Riches kind of exiled or removed or kind of destroyed or something like that, we still have another way to win the match, and that is with our token strategy with Hidden Stockpile. But that is all the cards in here besides lands. Let's go over lands real quick. We have 4 of Concealed Courtyard. Here's a black and white that can tap for it in early game. And then we also have 4 Evolving Wilds. This is going to set off Revolt for our Hidden Stockpile and Fatal Push. And of course, we have 2 Shefet Dunes, a great way to end a match for us. To can tap for colorless, pay 1 life, add white to your mana pool, and of course, pay 4 tap, sacrifice a desert. Creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. Activate this ability only anytime you can cast a sorcery, so a great way to end a match. Then we have 1 Forest, because for the Evolving Wilds, we want to grab 1 forest for the Vraska if we need it, if we don't want to use the treasure instead. We also have 6 Plains and 5 Swamp, and that is the full 60. So game 1 game plan, of course, turn 1 Legion's Landing, turn 2 Hidden Stockpile, try and get out our Direfleet Hoarders and our Gleaming Barrier to kind of slow down our opponent. Then maybe go for a Fumigate, create some treasures, try and get out a Anointed Procession to double everything, get out of Vraska to hopefully shut down our opponent as far as going wide, use Fumigate again if we need to, use Cast Out to get rid of some threats, build up our treasures, and then win with treasures or win with a full swing out of tokens. But what can we do in the game 2 game plan? Of course, our biggest weaknesses are going to be 1, aggro. It's going to need time to have setup, so aggro is going to be a big deal for us. We also have the control matchup to worry about. We really definitely want to not fall prey to a control matchup. And of course, the last matchup that's kind of difficult for us would be an energy matchup where 1 creature could turn into a huge monster, such as Longtusk Cub with a lot of energy on the stack. So let's go into the sideboard right here. We have 2 of Scavenger Grounds. This is going to help deal with the Selesnya aggro deck. This is going to help deal with the Boros aggro deck, anything with Eternalize, Embalm. Of course, this is going to help deal with the Godpharaoh's Gift as well. Next up, we have 2 Authority of the Consuls, a great way to deal with aggro for us, since we're definitely having a Fumigate, things like that in the main board, so we can get rid of them. But Authority of the Consuls is going to gain us some life and slow down our opponent. Of course, it's a 1 white mana enchantment. Creatures your opponent controls enters the battlefield tapped, and whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your opponent's control, you gain 1 life. So gaining life, making sure our opponent is coming in tapped, and making sure we actually have a response in the following turn with a sorcery speed card like Fumigate is very good for us. Next up here, we have 3 Duress. Duress is coming in against a control matchup. This is a 1 black mana sorcery. Target opponent reveals his or her hand. You choose a non-creature, non-land card from it. That player discards that card. We've been over this card several times throughout the week here, and Duress is a fantastic way to deal with control. Next up, we have 2 Argyle's Bloodfast. It's a 2 mana legendary enchantment. Because we have a lot of ways ways of gaining life in the game 1 and game 2, thanks to Annoyer Priest, things like that, and Fumigate. Playing 2 life and paying 2 mana to draw a card is actually quite good for us. But if we do get down to 5 or less life, we can transform Argos Bloodfast on our upkeep, and it turns into Temple of Aklazults. I think that's how I pronounce it. We can tap it, add 1 black to our mana pool, and sack a creature, gain life equal to the sacrificed creature's toughness, which actually is a revolt trigger on its own. So sacking a servo to gain 1 life, creating a revolt situation, using Fatal Push, and then using a hidden stockpile in step to create another servo. Quite good for us. It can be a nice passive way to get back from an aggro matchup in game 2. Next up here we have 4 Sunscourge Champion. This is an interesting card for us. It's a 3 mana 2/3 human wizard. When Sunscourge Champion enters the battlefield, you gain life equal to its power, which will gain 2 life when it enters the battlefield first, and it has Eternalize. You can pay for discard a card and Eternalize it, which means it does turn into a 4/4 with the same ability, gaining us 4 life. Sunscourge Champion is here because we have Anointed Procession on the battlefield to create 2 4/4s that actually gain us 8 life, which is amazing. A great way to swing back from a very aggressive matchup. But it's also here to kind of go up against those aggressive matchups to make sure that we can actually last long enough throughout that particular game. Ramming Up Red is still very, very fast and very powerful, being able to shock and strike our life total down. And Sunscourge Champion is going to be here as a wall, as well as creating some immediate life gain and even more life gain, as well as being a 4/4 body the following turn. And the last 2 cards here in the sideboard is against a Lost Legacy situation. We're going to bring in Mastermind's Acquisition. This is a 4 mana sorcery. Choose one, search your library for a card, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. So that's a tutor ability. Or we can choose a card you own from outside the game and put it into your hand. So this is where we're going to put a Revel in Riches from the game 1 into the sideboard, bring in Mastermind's Acquisition, and then we're going to be able to pull that from the sideboard back into our deck here and still use it. This is also very good at bringing in game 2 against like more transformative sideboards in probably the game 3 situation, where if we boarded out something that was really good against an opponent, if we want to board it back in, Mastermind's Acquisition can kind of help us do that. Very good card, very good on the curve, and very good at being able to just get out Revel in Riches if we kind of get Lost Legacied from that. But that is the full 75, folks. On empty Geotrader, it's coming to about 91 tickets, which isn't too bad, and in paper it's coming to about $147, which isn't too bad either. Pretty cheap if you ask me. As far as game 1 game plan, of course, we go out for a white mana, we go for Allegiance Landing, we go for Hidden Stockpile in turn 2, or Treasure Map there, get out a Direfleet Holder, get out a Gleaming Barrier to kind of make sure we have places to block some creatures, get some treasures, then either get to 4 or 5 mana, go for a Fumigate, or 4 or 5 mana, get for Anointed Procession, then a Revel, and then a Fumigate, get out a Vraska because we have treasures to sack for green mana, or go for an Evolving Wilds, kill something with Fatal Push, then get green mana for the Forest there, and of course in game 2 we have a decent way to combat control, aggro, and anything else that's coming our way. But of course that is the deck list. Let me know what you guys think. Do you like it? Do you hate it? Do you have any suggestions for it? Please let me know in the comments below. This was like a really weird build for me, honestly. I really liked kind of tinkering around with this deck a lot because I love the Abzan token strategy, and I do think that putting a Revel in Riches kind of in there as a sub-theme is a very good idea. But that's it for the video, guys. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys on stream or in the next video. Peace.